Okay, today, everybody, we are going through a little bit of Genesis 10 and 11. So let's get right in. The big thing we're going to talk about here is the idea that all humans share God's image and are meant to be part of God's family. So at the beginning, even to Abraham here, or not Abraham, I'm so sorry, we're not in Abraham yet. Even to Noah and to Adam and Eve, he gives this idea of being fruitful and multiplying and of filling the earth. But what seems to be happening as we keep going in the story is that we are filling the earth with people, but these people are also filling the earth with violence. And we see that when humanity seeks unity apart from God, it doesn't go well. So let's keep going further into Genesis, shall we? So, as we look at Genesis 10, we see how Noah's sons have been fruitful and multiplied. So let's just look at it together. And these are the genealogical records of Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japhet. Sons were born to them after the flood. Japhet's sons were Gomer, Magog, Madiah, Yavin, Tubal, Meshach, and Tiras. Gomer's sons were Ashkenaz, Riphtha, and Togarmah. You know what? I'm not going to read all these because I'm not going to struggle through all these names. Anyway, Japhet, Ham, and Shem all have sons. And as we can see from a lot of these, especially on Ham's line, the children he's having are turning into what we can see are these ancient enemies of the descendants of Shem, the Shemites, the Semites. Whether you see Nineveh or Canaan, or in a minute we are about to see Babel, which is eventually is Babylon. We know it's not going to go well. But before we get into all that, the people that are listed here are numbered 70. There are 14 Yaphites, 30 Hamites, and 26 Shemites. This figure of 70 is significant. Because whenever we see 70 in the Bible, it should give you this idea of totality. Versus 7 on a smaller scale, meaning perfection, right? So, like in Genesis 46:27, we are a long way from there. We'll be there in a couple weeks. It talks about the entire household of Jacob that went down to Egypt was 70 people. This represents the entire community of Israel. For instance, when we see after the Exodus, the Israelites in the wilderness, it consisted of 70 elders. Once again, totality, right? So, let's get into one last thing before we go into Babel. Genesis 10, 8 through 12. Now Cush fathered Nimrod. He became a mighty one on earth. He was a mighty hunter before Adonai. This is why it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before Adonai. The beginning of his kingdom included Babel, Erech, Echad, Chalnel in the land of Shinar. From that land, he went out to Assyria and built Nineveh, Rechavitir, Kala, and Rezin between Nineveh and Kala. It is the great city. This term, mighty one, can be translated Giborim, which is the same word that's used for Goliath. So it's heavily hinted here that there are some Nephilim descendants on the earth at this point in time. And this one is found in Babylon. So, what's going on here? Well, let's get to reading. These are the clans of Noah's sons. This is chapter 10, verse 32. According to their genealogies and their nations. And from these nations were dispersed on the earth after the flood. Now the entire earth had the same language with the same vocabulary. When they traveled eastward, stop. Whenever we're going east, that means we're heading away from Eden, which not only physically, but it seems like spiritually, we're also heading away from where Adonai, Yahweh, God is. They found a valley plain in the land of Shinar. We just talked about Shinar, and settled there. They said to one another, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them until they're hard." So they used bricks for stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let's build ourselves a city with a tower whose top reaches into heaven. So let's make a name for ourselves, or else we will be scattered over the face of the whole land." Then Adonai came down to see the city and the tower that the sons of man had built. And Adonai said, "Look, the people are one, and all of them have the same language. So this is what they have begun to do. Now, nothing they plan to do will be impossible. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so that they will not understand each other's language." So Adonai scattered them from there over the face of the entire land, and they stopped building the city. This is why it is called Babel, because Adonai confused their languages in the languages of the entire world, and from there Adonai scattered them over the face of the entire world. Okay. What's sticking out to you? Right off the bat, we talked about the Eastern thing. Adam and Eve leave the garden towards the east. Cain and his family and his lineage move east. And then Noah, after the flood happens and God brings the people back west, there's a story of recreation. And then they leave the ark and they head east. And then Noah and the vineyard and the family's heading east. And now all the nations of the world are heading east. It seems like even though there's divisions among the brothers, the people have all formed this kind of herd mentality and they're sticking together, right? It seems like the picture here is that people keep moving away from God's original intent and purposes. And moreover, it seems again, like before the flood, that evil is starting to organize. Starts as an individual, and then it moves to a family, and then it's about a whole family line. And now it seems like all of humanity is falling back into the same spot they were pre-flood. Like rebellion is becoming a civilization. So, let's talk about some Jewish letters, shall we? So, the vowels, there's no vowels in the Hebrew language, just consonants. Vowels are done by what's called breathing marks, and they're placed over the consonants. The Hebrew language, especially ancient biblical Hebrew, is just conglomeration of consonants. And you can hear it if you listen to Hebrew because of just the way the words sound. Now, one of the things we see here in the original Hebrew in this Tower of Babel story is that the consonants are very repetitive. So let's talk about what we see a lot of. There's a lot of N. There's a lot of B. There's a lot of L and a lot of H. So N, B, L, and H. And these consonants continue to appear in the same order. And then when we get about halfway through, that order reverses. Now, we've been doing this long enough now that y'all will probably understand that this means there is a chiasm. Of course there is. So, it's really hard to see in the English because we don't have these letter clues. But you can see it if you look at 10:32 as the beginning, chapter 10, verse 32. And you compare it with 11, chapter 11, 8, and 9. You're definitely going to see the bookends there. You could probably see some hints of it through the English reading, but the center is going to lie in about the second half of chapter 11, verse 4. So, if you look there, the question is, if we've been comparing the first half of, or the first couple chapters of Genesis to these chapters, and the center of the chiasm is, so let's make a name for ourselves, or else we will be scattered over the face of the whole land. What does that tell us? So if what we just did last video about Noah's curse paralleled Genesis 3, then this should parallel Genesis 4, which is Cain and Abel. Now, Cain's curse was that he was going to be a wanderer. And the center of this story is about being scattered and God not wanting them to settle. So, why does God not want his people to settle and be in a fixed state? Maybe because they're away from his will. Maybe because they're heading further away from what he's doing. And let's talk about the line that says, if we don't do something, they're going to be able to accomplish anything. I mean, isn't that what God wants us to accomplish? Doesn't he want us to be unified? I mean, think about Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. So it seems kind of weird that God would be like, well, I can't have them doing this. We can't let them accomplish anything. But when we start paralleling this story with Cain and Abel, I think we can see pretty clearly what's going on. See, God started the story by telling us that creation was good. Over and over and over, he says this creation is good. And then he invited us, Adam and Eve, humanity, into joining him and trusting in his story. To trust him that we had enough, that he had made enough, and we could rest in it. But Adam and Eve didn't trust. They took matters into their own hands. They failed to lean into their identity of being made in the image of God and chose to give in to their desires. In the next story, we see that Cain is also invited to trust in God's goodness, to trust that there's enough, to trust that just because Abel is favored does not mean that Cain won't be favored. But the consequences of his fear and insecurity and jealousy bring another failure. Then God reaffirms that creation is good after a cosmic decreation in the form of a flood. He recreates. Noah steps off the ark. Things are good until Noah reintroduces shame, takes matters into his own hands, and deals out a curse. and by doing so tries to step into the role of Adonai. Here we find another step in the narrative where man's rebellion is starting to organize. Mankind is beginning to look like God, but not our God. He's beginning to look like a God, but not a good one. Man's rebellion started with this sense of curiosity and exploration. And mankind thinks that they're ready to exercise their creativity to its fullest extent. The problem with that is they have not learned to trust the story, to trust in Adonai. And they have not learned how to rein in their desires. They refuse to know when to say enough. And God can't let them settle like that. He's got to scatter them. Not to be mean, but to be kind. The same reason he couldn't let Adam and Eve stay in the garden. This is my iPhone. It is a great bit of technology. And you see, the thing that they tell us at the beginning of this story is about the brick. See, the brick was a brand new technological advance. Like, we can make bricks, and we can use these bricks to make a whatever. Instead of going out and lugging these heavy stones and trying to make things out of rough-hewn stones, they have this brick. And a brick's not bad. You can use a brick to build an orphanage. Or you can use a brick to break a window. Just like my iPhone. It's not inherently bad. I can use it to read my Bible. I can use it to call my friends. I can use it to check on my kids' locations. I can use it to do lots of good, wholesome things. I can also use it to look at things I'm not supposed to, or post horrible things on social media, or spend money that I don't have on things that I don't need to impress people that I don't even like. God's not anti-technology. He's anti-evil. He's anti us taking advantage of others, and he's anti the pride in a human heart that would lead us to destruction. What do they say about the tower? They're going to build a tower that is going to ascend to the heavens. Babylon is a human attempt to unify around the wrong name, to make a name for themselves and not lean on the name of Adonai. We're starting to see a division here between the kingdom of God and what we'll call empire. God is seeing that humanity has become too powerful for our own good, and he saves us from ourselves. And this sets us up for where we're going. You see, God's been trying to focus on the whole world. Trying to redeem all of humanity. Changes our language. Why does he change the languages? It's not really a curse. It's an inconvenience. The word Babel is a play on the Hebrew word for confusion. There's no punishment here. There's no curse here. There's just confusion. And you might say, why? I mean, well, obviously it's going to slow down their thing. Their tower building, for sure. It's going to scatter them. But think about what that does. Think about what it's like when you meet someone who doesn't speak your language. You see, you can't learn the language of another people, another culture, unless you learn a little bit about their history and about their perspective. And when you have to do that, you always have to slow down. You have to be humble enough to learn how to control your own desires, control your own drive, your own need to succeed, your own need to get it whatever done to reach a common goal together. Seems like in this confusion at the Tower of Babel, God is not sending us to our rooms without dinner or doling out some huge curse. He's given us a new project to work on. Project being to be a version of humanity that can grow into His image. A humanity that will know when to say enough. A people that can trust His story. And in the trust of His story, maybe, just maybe, find a place where they can rest. I'm not great at teamwork. That's a confession. I'm working on it. I'm very particular. I'm very kind. And I love people. I'm an extrovert. Well, I'm an omnivert. But I like things done a certain way. In this particular season of my life, I'm very busy and I'm having to delegate a lot. And it is the biggest training ground in humility that I've had in a while. But this is God setting up me for success. To know how to let go of things that don't matter that much. Just like this is God's way of setting up humanity for success. Because the moment they want to learn this lesson is the moment they're going to find their way back to the story. But as long as they don't want to work together, as long as they want to hate each other, as long as they want to make a name for themselves, they're just going to continue to sit right where God sent them. Now, as I was saying earlier, God's done kind of focusing on the whole world at the moment. And what we see He's going to do is He's going to start looking for someone. Someone who's willing to trust the story. Someone who's willing to go back west. Having scattered the nations abroad, God's eyes rest on a man named Abram. And we will begin his story next week. Love y'all.